Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and start recording here so we can get this kicked off. Want to welcome everybody. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you guys don't have to sit here and look at my ugly mug this whole time. But hello, everyone. I am Paul Jury. I'm the founder of PJ Test Prep. My last name is just like in the court. If you want to make fun of it, some suggestions include injury, forgery, grand jury, perjury. And if I ever went to England and got knighted, I would be surgery. I am coming to you guys from PJ Test Prep. We are a boutique SAT, ACT prep company based in South Bay, Los Angeles, where many of you are from. I've been helping kids get into college for a long time, doing SAT, ACT academic tutoring. I also spend the other half of my days doing writing projects. And in fact, I majored in writing at Northwestern, a school that never should have let me in based on my GPA, but these essays do help. So do test scores, I guess. But I spend the other half of my time doing writing. My second book will be out hopefully soon, and I've written for a bunch of TV shows you guys have never heard of. But weirdly, I hopefully feel uniquely qualified for this role in helping you guys write your college application essays, because I spend half my time getting kids into college and the other half of my time doing creative writing. So the creative writing to get into college overlap is my Venn diagram overlap here. So I'm hoping to give you guys a good rocket launch in the right direction here today. But as promised, less of me, more of my screen. So can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can see what's going on my screen here? All right, thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Mike. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to try to keep this meeting high and tight. It'll be hopefully under an hour if I can do this well. But today's function is to teach and talk to you guys about where things are with the college application essays these days, but especially to give you guys a window into what these people want to see. What do these college admissions counselors want to read about when they are looking at your essay? Now, obviously, we want to make sure these essays still are genuine, that they are you, and they will be. You never want to follow one of the gimmicks, that you've heard about online, or do something I say here today at the expense of who you are. But it is good to keep in mind what helps people stand out, because that is, of course, the point of these essays. So I'm going to speak quickly about the current status of the essay and where things are today. I'll speak at a little bit more length about the three approaches that you should take to coming up with standout application essays. And then I'll just do a little piece on the end before the question and answer about, so where do we go from here? Now, during all of this, any students who are watching this video, or either live here or on recording later, I have a charge for you. I want you to be writing down as we go as many ideas as you can come up with, because as we always say, in essay writing, the first idea you come up with is unlikely to be your very best one, just like the first person you ever date is unlikely to be your soulmate. And so we need to come up with a bunch of ideas. You need to date a bunch of people. You need to collect a lot of Legos before you have enough to build something with. So come up with, if you can, 8, 9 ideas, and then narrow those down. I'll maybe say this again later, but the most effective and time and cost efficient way to do this whole process is if you're applying to some UCs, you have to come up with 4 essays for those. So brainstorm 8 ideas, pick your best 4 to be your UC essays, and then as you start to write and develop those, whichever one of them seems like the very best, well, elongate that or combine 2 ideas and make that your longer Common App essay. And then kill 2 birds with 1 stone, kill a whole bunch of birds with 5 stones. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about where things are at these days, what's changed and what's not. Obviously, the latest updates these years are these days here in 2013 or 2023. If you're watching this, is we've got chatbots, and we've got Supreme Court and decisions about where college applications are going, which many of you are probably aware has slightly affected the application essay situation. There are ways in which it hasn't. Should you write about diversity in your essay here? Can you write about it? Are you going to get arrested or something if you mention, your ethnicity? No, you're not. It's fine. In fact, even the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, in his opinion, was like, no, we're not saying you can't write about this stuff in your essays. You can totally talk about how your background relates to your experience. And that's always been true. And that's always been a good thing to write about. That hasn't changed. Since you can't put it anywhere else on your application, do you feel like you have to put it on there? It's up to you. If you are from an underrepresented group, and it doesn't just have to be, ethnicity, but if you're a female in engineering, which shouldn't be an underrepresented group, but still is. Yeah, absolutely. How I grew to learn coding in Girl Scouts is a cool essay, or, how my experience moving to this country from another country, how that, it taught me things. Yes, that stuff is always good. No, you shouldn't just shoehorn in your background into any old essay just because that's not what they're for. And even if that, they're not supposed to look at that, but that's just bad essay writing in general. So that, in a way, it hasn't changed. If your background is a story and it affects your outlook on the world, that's something that we'll cover in approach number 2 here in a minute. But if it doesn't, then no, you don't have to write about anything. Also, should I have a chatbot write my essay? No, just no. First of all, I've seen the kinds of application essays these things are cranking out, and they are terrible. They are generic and vague and awful. Also, there's no way that it's going to represent who you are. And even if these people don't run your essay through one of the chatbot detectors and determine that it was computer written, they will, of course, sense it by just the generic boilerplate standard that it has. So anyway, those are the updates. But let me take you guys through what we always discuss with brainstorming standout college application essays. So the first rule of writing is you always need to consider your audience. And when it comes to your college application essay, your audience is this guy, this disgruntled, hollowed out husk of a human being who's read 87,000 Boy Scout essays in a row, and he just wants to just pass out among all the fake books on his bookshelf behind him. Now, actually, demographically, this is more likely to be female and younger, but how do we know this guy's not 28? He's just got gray hair because he read too many I like passion, and passion makes me try hard for my goals essays. Now, you do want to think about what these people in whatever admissions office, wherever it is you're applying, they always do have the same concerns. Another valedictorian, oh, I just want somebody different. On the other hand, if I can get that kid who's going to make big waves out in the world, maybe my boss will finally give me that raise. And this is my 5,000th application today. Honestly, I just wish I could read something interesting. This fourth one here is, kind of goes without saying. Obviously, you don't want to just send something in without having spell checked it or have the wrong school's mascot in there. But yeah, I hope you do that one already. But as far as these other concerns, these relate directly to the 3 approaches that I suggest you think about while you are coming up with your college application essays. And let's dive right in. The first approach is called Be Impressive. Basically, colleges are businesses. In a way, this is the most cynical approach, kind of recognizes that colleges are always looking to build their brand. And well, how does Harvard stay top ranked every single year besides that it has a cool name? Well, because the people who graduate from there are, future leaders. These are people who go out into the world and really kick butt. Now, is it because Harvard's teachers are so awesome and they're teaching them things that other schools can't teach them? Not really. I've had a few friends who went to Harvard and kind of just learned the same stuff there as most other colleges. But it's usually because the people going in there have a certain perhaps drive or a certain impressiveness that these colleges can sense is going to funnel into a very productive, very go-getter kind of a person. So representing yourself as somebody who seems impressive, somebody who's going to, go out and start the next Facebook is a really good way to, to impress these people, frankly. All colleges love this, but how do we do this? We can't just say, I am very impressive. I'm going to go start the next Facebook, because first of all, that sounds really pretentious. B, you're probably not going to. Somebody already made that and See, Facebook's not even cool anymore. Although this new Threads thing, I think, is getting them some attention. So who knows? Maybe they are cool again. Anyway, what can we do? How do we show a college that we are impressive without saying we are impressive? Well, as with all of these things, the second rule of writing is to show, not tell. And so we show them by discussing something that you already did. You're going to suggest what big things you're going to do on campus or out in the world by talking about the things you already did. All of these essays, these impressive essays, have something in it where the kid took some action that maybe not everybody would have taken. Now, that's a generic kind of way to say it. And so, as the show don't tell mantra teaches us, I'm going to show you with a couple of quick stories. I'm going to actually tell you 6 stories here today, 2 for each of our approaches. And again, while I'm telling these stories, hopefully they'll be so captivated that you can't focus on anything else, but be jotting down ideas that remind you of things you've done in your own life. And at the end of this approach, I'll give you a couple of questions that you should ask yourself in hopefully coming up with these. So our first story today is a kid who I worked with a few years back, and they were very interested in theater, specifically playwriting. They wanted to, write for theater or maybe for television or something like that, something I could sort of identify with. They went to a school that had a very active theater department where every spring after they did their fall musical and their summer Shakespeare play, they would do this thing called the one-acts, which were written by students. Students would write 15 to 30 page plays, submit them. The very picky theater director would then select the best 5 or 6 of them, which would of course be assigned to student directors who would then cast student actors, and then they'd have this big showcase at the end of the year, and it was really interesting. So this kid saw this freshman year and was like, wow, this is amazing. I got to do this. I got to figure out how to do this. The problem is I have no idea how to write a play. And so they sat down, they taught themselves playwriting over their summer after freshman year. They went to the library, got a bunch of books, read a bunch of things online, and wrote their first ever play, a silly piece about a kid who gets a time-stopping magical stopwatch and creates all kinds of havoc at school during lunch. So the play gets accepted, and the actors are cast, and this essay opens with that warm, dark auditorium where this writer is sitting in a carefully selected aisle seat where they can run screaming from the room if this goes embarrassingly wrong, when suddenly a spotlight cuts the darkness and illuminates a character they had created out of their head. And the character says their first line, and the audience laughs. And then the second character comes out in a second spotlight and says their first line, and the audience laughs. And suddenly in that warm, dark auditorium, this writer is hit with this even warmer feeling of, oh man, I know what I want to do with my life. Now, nowhere in this story does he say, oh, I'm going to be a Tony-winning playwright. You better admit me, or I'm going to give all my Tony money to some other school. But you kind of get that idea. Notice that really all they did was tell the story of what happened. And in the course of that, they planted certain impressive things, like they taught themselves playwriting on their own after their freshman year. Who does that? They also, and this was subtle, but notice the very picky theater director selected the first play that they ever wrote as a sophomore, presumably against mostly juniors and seniors submitting these kinds of things. They never said, oh, the play went spectacularly well and it was a brilliant piece of writing. They just hinted that it went well and suggested, hey, listen, probably I don't suck at this because, the play got performed. They had another one junior year and they were looking forward to writing their third one as a senior. But those little elements are just simply story elements rather than brag points. And sure, it's okay to brag about yourself a little bit in these essays, but it's even better if you can just slip it into the narrative. So again, show what you're going to do by talking about what you have already done. Another example that's maybe a little less dramatic is a student who had been in mock trial, another extracurricular activity besides playwriting, that they had joined, not for any noble reason. Their dad was a lawyer, and they're like, I don't know, maybe I could think about doing that, but what's being a lawyer involved? They didn't really have any noble reason for joining mock trial other than that they needed an extracurricular activity, and their dad said, well, you really like to argue, so why don't you do it for an extracurricular? Anyway, they joined, had some success with the group over the next couple of years, and junior year rolls around. At the end of the year, the coach says, hey, listen, you've been with the team for a couple of years now. What would you think about being a captain next year? And the kid thinks about it and he goes, I don't know, coach. I mean, I really enjoy it and everything, but I don't know if I'm going to do mock trial next year. There's a lot of other activities, and I guess I don't know what mock trial has to do with the real world. Like, we're not really like trying legal cases. We're debating like how to cure global warming and stuff. Like, what does this have to do with a real lawyer's job? And the coach goes, hey, listen, I get it. Tell you what, next Friday, you guys don't have school. I've got a friend. He's a lawyer. He always tries cases over at the Torrance courthouse. Court's open to the public. Why don't you go sit in? Why don't you just watch a day of real trials and see if that sheds any light on the point of mock trials? So he says, okay, sure, I'll go. I don't have anything going on that day. Goes down to the Torrance courthouse, watches 7 straight hours of court trials on a Friday morning and afternoon. And let me tell you, this is not like on TV. This is not, O.J. Simpson, A Few Good Men, court trials on Judge Judy. This is like a guy fighting a parking ticket. There was a case where a guy wanted to get 1 additional day of custody over his daughter per month. And the most dramatic case of the day was a young woman had gotten in a fight at a bar and hit somebody with a bottle and might have to spend 1 week in jail. So anyway, he's watching this, and the lawyers are dropping their notes and the judge can't hear what anybody's saying and everything is so slow. And his first reaction is like, oh my God, this is so boring. But it's real. Like, these are really people's lives here, and like a parking ticket, who cares? But that, 1 day of custody per month might not be a big deal to you or me. That's a big deal to that dad, to that kid. And going to jail for a week. I'm tough. I could do a week in the joint, but that's probably a huge deal for this girl. It might be a life-changing incident for her. So he goes back and he says, okay, coach, I'll do it, but only if we can do a parking trial next year. Anyway, again, he never in this essay says, oh, I'm going to be a great defense attorney and make lots of money and donate it, and you need to admit me, or I'm going to go to some other law school. But you kind of get that idea. Not that he's done anything that amazing. He didn't win any national mock trial tournaments or anything like that, but he has this insight, and it starts with this action that he took that maybe not everybody has done. So when you were brainstorming ideas that could potentially be impressive essay topics, I want you to ask yourself a couple questions like, what are you good at? What might you study in college? When did you realize you were good at that thing, or that you might want to study that? Have you ever got a chance to show that you're good at it? Or did you ever like go above and beyond in an extracurricular, like you started a club, or you took a leadership role in a club, or you did really well on one assignment, you went above and beyond what your classmates were doing? All of those are ways to sort of get at this idea of, I am pretty good at math. And you know what, I did do this really cool math project for this class. Or, oh yeah, I was in this math tournament and placed 3rd place or something like that. And that showed me that I liked algebra, but I kind of stunk at geometry. So I went home and, oh yeah, I did a bunch of YouTube videos on Khan Academy on geometry just because I wanted to be better at it. Yeah, you know what, I have done things. I have taken initiative. So think about what you have done that isn't what everybody would do. Because what that shows me as a reader is that you're going to keep doing things that not everybody would do, and that's going to make you impressive and successful. Approach 2, be different. Colleges don't just want butts and chairs. They want all types of students. They want diversity. So you, as another approach, can suggest what makes you different than all the other hardworking, good grade getting students out there. You don't have to have done really impressive things. If you just have a unique background or quirk to you or experience set or something that shows your difference from the rest of the kids who all have good grades in that big pile that the readers are reading. Now, this one, as I hinted at earlier, is kind of particularly topical right now because, there's one type of diversity that's in the news. But that's not the only type of diversity. And I do have to say something that I always say about diversity in these essays. Colleges always want diverse campuses. It doesn't just have to be the color of your skin, but they want people with lots of different types of lives. Why? Why is diversity good? So that you can get a really cool photograph with lots of different colored people for your website. Maybe that's a side marketing bonus for these schools, but that's not actually what's good about diversity. What's cool about diversity is that people learn better and grow more when they're around different people with different life experiences. And your religion or your home country or home state may have taught you and shaped you into an interesting person that other people can benefit from, just as you are benefiting from them. And so there used to be a box that you could check that says, oh, I'm so-and-so ethnicity or whatever. That may not exist now. However, the essay can still be an opportunity to show, first of all, if you think, oh, I have a unique background that's underrepresented. Colleges probably secretly really want this, even though they're not allowed to say they do. I got to include that. Sure. But even if you're going to do that, I ask you to also go a step deeper, because what we really care about is how that has shaped who you are. It also, by the way, in case, yes, the school does want 16 more people with purple skin with pink polka dots. Oh, but there's 50 of you applying, and you all wrote about that. Well, why am I picking you over the other people with your same background? Because you went deeper and you showed how it shaped your worldview. So let me give you, once again, 2 examples. I had a student a few years back who had moved from a different country. Now, swap out the country that he's from with the country that you're from, or the state that you're from, or whatever. Swap out his, country background with your, identity background in other ways. If you are trans, or if you are a certain religion or whatever, any of this is interchangeable. But this kid said, hey, I moved here from Russia when I was 9 years old. Russia also in the news, very topical examples today. And, good thing he got out in time. Anyway, this kid, had moved from Russia when he was 9 years old. His parents said, hey, kid, pack your bags. We're moving to Redondo Beach. I know you've never left Moscow before, but here we go. So the first sentence of his essay, and, this is a good start. As I stepped off the plane at LAX, sounds like a Miley Cyrus song, and saw my first ever palm tree, I realized, I'm not in Moscow anymore. Now, right away, that's a good start, because most people can't say that. But again, you got to go deeper. And I'll say the first draft of this kid's essay didn't go much deeper than that. It was kind of your typical, I didn't fit in and then I wanted to fit in essay. He didn't have the right kind of clothes. He didn't know how to barely even swim, much less surf. And, he had a thick accent, and he didn't want any of that. He wanted to fit in with these new friends, and he worked hard, and sure enough, a couple years later, boom, he's got lots of friends. It's all going well. And that was the problem. I said, listen, it's different that you moved from another place, but wanting to fit in, doesn't everybody want that? Like, I'm not really seeing a lot of grit or determination, or really that much difference between you and anybody else who moved from another place. And so, can you go a little deeper? Can you tell me a little bit more about what was specific with your moving situation? As you all should be thinking, okay, how am I different than other people with my background? So he said, well, all that's true. But I will say, after I'd been there for a couple of years and I felt like things were going pretty well, I had friends. One day, my grandma called, who still lives back in Moscow, and started yammering in Russian 1 million words a minute on the phone. And she's like, da, 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 da. And I'm like, oh no, I can't understand a single thing my grandma's saying. So he realized in that moment something about assimilation, what assimilation actually means. He'd been trying so hard to just change himself to be, to fit where he was now, which, and there is part of that with assimilation. You can't just stay the same and never change, but it's also a little bit about taking who you are and changing where you are. So he started a Russian club at his school, started wearing some of his old weird Russian shoe styles. He actually got a brief fashion trend to catch on with Russian style shoes at his school. And most importantly, he made sure he talked to his grandma every Sunday. And so once again, we go a little deeper, and you can sort of see an interesting perspective of like, oh yeah, this kid understands the world a little bit better because of his background. Had he not gone through that, had he not been from there, had he not looked like that, he might not have developed the maturity and the outlook and the worldview that he did. So think about, what's your different, just, literally what's different between you and most of your friends. Okay, but then go a step deeper. Now, it doesn't just have to be like a background like that. It could be a quirk, an experience that you live. Sometimes people are like, I'm just a middle-class white male from the suburbs. What's different about me? Well, probably not that, but maybe your family takes a trip every summer and you get to see what, rural northern Minnesota, which is where I was yesterday, is like. Or maybe your family. I had one kid he was like, I'm the most boring kid ever. And I'm like, I'm sure that's not true. Kind of was really boring. But after a while, we stumbled upon this experience he'd gone through where his family and he, when their house was being renovated, had lived in a trailer in their front yard for the summer. And there were 6 of them living in this tiny trailer. And he's like, you really find out what you like and don't like about your family when you're crammed into a telephone booth with them for 3 months. And so that was a different experience that he had that kind of showed him, it taught him about social connections and, how we all need our privacy and our space, but we all also need each other to lean on during hard times. So, you find that message sometimes later as you're fleshing this out. But let me give you the other example. The other one was a girl who totally called me on my word. She's like, different, eh? Well, I'm a twin. So checkmate. Twins are only 3% of the population. I'm already different just by writing that. And I said, that is true. But, and I don't know how we found this, like God bless deep Google, but she really wanted to go to UCSB, which, doesn't admit a huge percentage of its applicants. And we had found somehow that there had been 110 twins that had applied there the previous year, and they only let in 36 of them. And so she was like, oh, well, they probably all wrote about being a twin, because like, what else do you write about when you're a twin? But, I said, again, like, but why does being a twin make you a better student? Why does being from Egypt make you a better student, a better college student? Why does being a one-legged albino lumberjack from Wyoming make you a better college student? Because there probably are a couple of others of those, and they're also applying for the same lumberjack scholarship. Anyway, this girl said, okay, well, let me go into more depth. And she said, well, me and my sister were identical growing up. We were, we looked the same, we dressed the same. My mom had us on all the same activities. It was really annoying. It was like being a copy of another person. But then when they hit puberty, they began to diverge. And I guess this happens with identical twins sometimes. Her sister got a little taller than her and became a little more athletic. She kind of got a little bit more into school, and her eyes even changed color, which sounds like a very X-Men thing to happen, but apparently occurs with twins sometimes. Anyway, as she is switching with her sister from their tiny middle school to their ginormous high school with like 2,500 students, her and her sister on the first day of freshman year, they looked through their schedules and they realized they don't have a single class together. And as her sister is walking away across the quad from her, she's like, a lot of people always wonder what it'd be like to be a twin. I always wondered what it'd be like not to be one. And on the first day of freshman year, I found out. So she wrote her essay about individuality, how nobody understands individuality better than she does, because for 15 years, she wasn't one. She was just a copy of somebody else. Now, both of my examples here for the be different thing began with some kind of background thing, something that the student couldn't help. This could be an interest of yours too. It could be an experience that you lived through, whether it was a good experience or a tragic experience. That sometimes overlaps with approach 3 in a minute. But if you went through something tough, if you suffered racial discrimination, if you lost a family member, or you endured some kind of tragedy, they're not letting you in because of the tragedy. These people do not feel sympathy. This guy is, like I said, just a hardened shell of a human. He used to have a soul, but it evaporated long ago. They're never letting you in. Also, no matter how bad your story is, man, somebody else had some worse tragedy. And again, having a tragedy doesn't make you a better college student. It's how that shaped who you are. So dig deeper on these be different ones. Everybody has something different about them, but you got to try to think about what that has taught you. And it can also, by the way, it doesn't have to teach you something about the world. Like both my examples also were like, I learned about this, a nebulous theme like assimilation or individuality. It can be how swimming lessons taught me to be a better doctor, or how, playing soccer taught me that I wanted to get into politics. Now, again, anything you can do that's unexpected or a little less common, how soccer taught me that I enjoy sports and want to be in sports management or physical therapist. That can still work. That's not a bad essay. But if it's, how soccer taught me that I wanted to be a librarian, interesting, go on. Where have you heard that? So remember, the point of these is to stand out. And so anything that you can do both with your background or where it takes you can be good. I'll talk a little bit more about the comboing idea here in a minute as well. Finally, approach number 3 is just simply to be interesting. They got to read a lot of these essays. So if you can write something that they haven't seen a million times, they appreciate that. Now, this can take the form of literally just what's the craziest thing I can write about? What's the weirdest topic? You know, this one isn't even one of my students, but a counselor colleague of mine said, I remember this girl like 15 years ago wrote her whole essay about a stick of chapstick. How like she wanted to find out what was at the bottom, but like you never finish a stick of chapstick. You lose it or they get all gruzzy because nobody's lips are that big. But one day she's like, I can't take it anymore, and just cracked it open with a hammer, and there was just the plastic screw down in there. Spoiler, there wasn't like a prize or anything. But she didn't earn it. She was like, I cheated. I skipped to the end of the book and it was lame. And the counselor's like, she admitted, she's like, I don't even really remember what the stick of chapstick thing said about her. I just remember this girl wrote her essay about a stick of chapstick. I still remember it to this day. So sometimes going all out for like funny or sad or weird or crazy or whatever can be an interesting way to set your essay apart. It doesn't have to be the full function of your essay. Any essay can be interesting. You know, even if you're telling an essay that shows something impressive or is different, hopefully the stories that I've told so far were a little bit interesting. Be touching, be funny, be whatever fits your topic. Don't use a gimmick that isn't you. I should put, well, I'll put 2 caveats on this one. One now, one at the end. The caveat is be careful that you're not trying to take on a task that you're not meant for. Sometimes people, I'll give you an example of a funny essay here in a minute. Sometimes people are like, oh, that funny essay was so funny. Should I write a funny essay? I'm like, well, it depends. Are you funny? Because if you're not, oh, dear God, please don't make us suffer through that. Oh, I want to write a tragic essay because like I heard they love sob stories. Like, well, what's your sob story? Oh, my gerbil died. Not if that's in the pile after somebody who like both their parents died or something, like yikes. Don't do something that isn't you. Find something that fits you. That being said, sometimes a really interesting story can lead to some depth about you that you may not even have noticed. First example, student named Jesse from a few years back had this uncle that he just adored. Jesse's uncle was this big outdoors man, taught him everything about the outdoors, how to hunt, how to surf, how to hang a bear bag, how to build a fire with only 2 toothpicks and a stern glare. And Jesse and him did everything. He taught him how to surf, how to do all this stuff. Unfortunately, Jesse's uncle has a stroke. And the stroke renders him unable to do just about anything. Suddenly, instead of hunting and camping and surfing, he's now confined to a wheelchair in his room. And Jesse's like, well, this is not cool. I can't go down like this. I got to do something. I got to help him. I can't cure what's wrong with my uncle, but like, what can I do? So he helps get a wheelchair ramp installed in the uncle's house so his uncle can go outside again. He helps I think they bought a wheelchair with big fat inflatable tires so his uncle could go on the beach again. And helped to get a handicap accessible van so his uncle could go camping one last time. The story doesn't have a happy ending. The uncle dies. But even in his sadness, Jesse realizes that his uncle had taught him one last lesson, which is that he really liked helping people. And so that's why he wanted to get into medicine. You can see that this is a story where you're like, oh yeah, you know, touches you a little bit, feels a little bit that you feel bad for Jesse, but you also, he did plant that like, maybe he's going to be a better doctor than other people because he's going to be the one there in the library still on his 3rd consecutive night of Orgo all-nighters. He's going to be there doing it for his uncle. So don't shy away from a sad story or a happy story. You know, think about what it's taught you and what it's made you want to do. But sometimes that's a really good way to grab attention, make your essay stand out, and then you could circle back to like, okay, let me make sure I check the box with the other things they want to see. Another example, probably the opposite of the Jesse's uncle story. There was this kid who wrote his entire essay about the basement in their house. How he had 2 younger brothers, and they're all kind of like sports kids. They were very, very big and rowdy and athletic, and they would just fight with each other all the time and play tackle football in the living room and crash each other through the hutch. And finally, they broke so many things in their house that their parents were like, okay, we're moving. And listen, in this new house, here are the rules. They sat them down on the first day they moved into their house and said, listen, you animals, apparently we can't keep you from fighting each other. So here's the deal. We are giving you the basement. You just get that floor. We're not going to go down there. We're not going to even put any furniture there. You just do whatever you got to do. But if we ever catch you fighting in any other part of the house, we're going to lock you in the trunk of the car for the weekend. So this basement very quickly became like a gladiator arena, like a Hunger Games, Lord of the Flies, every man for himself survival pit that all the neighborhood kids would come in and sign a waiver before they went down there. And the oldest brother here, the one writing the story, his game was basically senior game master. He was in charge of coming up with these ridiculous, rowdy games that were basically just thinly veiled excuses for him to beat the snot out of his younger brothers. But they had this game called Hernier, like hernia, but with an R at the end, where they would block up all the windows in the room so that it was pitch black, and then they would all run through the room swinging hockey sticks. And if you hit somebody, well, it made a different sound than if you hit the wall. So everybody else knew where to throw their hockey sticks like javelins. There's another game where the youngest brother's name was Alex, and the only rule of the game was hit Alex with pillows in the head and neck until he falls down. And the game was called Hit Alex with pillows in the head and neck until he falls down. And Alex didn't like this game, but everybody else thought it was a blast. So you're reading this insane essay with all this vivid description, and you're like, what is wrong with this psychopath? But I kind of want to hang out with him. And if they're like chuckling, as he's talking about his head going through the wall and becoming embedded in 6 inches of plywood, and he still has some splinters he hasn't gotten out. And the other admissions counselors are hearing this one person like laughing, and they're like, what's he reading? I got my 18th I'm interested in biology essay. What are you reading? If they're passing your essay around, bro, like that's a good sign. So another way to go is just think of what's the weirdest thing that ever happened to you? What's the weird thing that you like? Now I'm going to segue here into something that I love when kids do, is what I call the double essay or the pair essay, where you have maybe 2 ideas that on their own aren't that unique or special or impressive or whatever, but you combine them and link them in some way. I mentioned the girl who had talked about her love of medicine and biology gaining another level when she taught swimming lessons, not in the pool, but in the ocean, where it's a lot more chaotic. Little kids are getting washed into jetties and stuff. At the same summer as she interned in the emergency room, she's like, learning about somebody's lungs and the Krebs cycle of oxygen is one thing in a biology textbook in a quiet room. It's another thing when somebody's lungs aren't working because there's a bullet hole in them and there's madness in the emergency room. And so it taught me about like the science and calm of medicine, but also the chaos and unpredictability of it is kind of like the difference between swimming in the ocean and swimming in the water. So swimming lessons, I like medicine. Okay, there's an interesting combination there. Sometimes an idea can be birthed from a connection between 2 things you never thought would be connected. I had a kid write about his drum group won this big contest the same day that his dad was getting heart surgery, which was like a sad story, but then also this like cool thing that happened with the drums. And there's this great moment where he's like thinking about his dad, trying to beat his dad's beating heart back to life. And that interesting connection makes a contrast and makes a comparison between 2 things. It makes the essay more interesting, but it also shows this kid's perceptiveness in finding that connection. So one thing you can do for this approach is just think of the most random thing about you, even if it's something so shallow that you're like, how could this ever be an essay? I say this kind of jokingly, but I told the same thing to a kid once, and I was like, so what's weird about you? What's quirky? And he's like, well, I really, really like blueberry muffins. Like I eat like 5 of them a day. I'm like, that's a lot of fiber. It must be very regular. But like, okay, yeah, I don't immediately see how that like relates to, your interest in studying in college. And he's like, what? Like how my interest in blueberry muffins made me interested in calculus? And I was like, I know you're joking, but I would read that essay. And so finding something that is interesting about you, just like finding something that's different about you, finding something that's impressive about you, and then connecting it to something else on your list. That's another reason to come up with 10 ideas before you start. Sometimes you draw a line between 2 and you're like, A isn't that interesting. B isn't that interesting, but how A led to B, now that's an interesting essay idea. So don't be afraid to combine. A few other general essay tips in brainstorming, because again, that is the goal today. And I hope you guys are remembering what I said. Write down some ideas. I hope you have a few already. A couple other things. Remember, you don't have to say what you already said on your application. If you already put in your activities list that you're the president of the student body, I know that's very impressive. And I know you feel like, oh, that's my flagship activity that I have to write. I spend all my time playing soccer, so I should write about soccer. No, they already know that you play soccer. So, why don't you write about something else? Now, I'm not saying you can't write about being the president of the student body if there's a story there. But if your experience is pretty typical of any president of a student body, it wasn't that interesting how you won the election, and it's not that interesting what you do, leave it at that. They know how that works. They know that's a hard job. Tell your story about something else. Cliche topics are topics that get done to death. I've kind of teased a few of them. I'm a little more flexible about this than some like essay advisors are. Yeah, writing a sports essay is very, very overdone. Writing a trip essay is pretty overdone. Writing about a hardship, or a mental trauma, yeah, all that stuff gets done a lot. But, new sports movies get made every year, and some of them are pretty good. So just because a topic you think is cliche doesn't mean you can't do it, but just know what you're getting into. If you're going to write about soccer, you're going to be in a pile with a lot of other soccer essays. How is yours different? Again, like how soccer taught me about the stock market. Cool. I haven't seen that one. That's not really a soccer essay then, is it? It's more like my interest in business and economics. But how I'm good at soccer and I scored the game-winning goal. Well, either they already know that because the coach told them to let you in because you're on scholarship, or else if they haven't heard of you, how good at soccer could you really be? So just be aware that if you have a topic that you think a lot of people write about, make sure yours is unique in some way. Smoke words, this is more of a polish thing, but smoke words refer to those words that kids always use in these essays, and so did the chatbots, that they think sound impressive but are lame, like determination, grit, passion, dedication, goals. If your first sentence is, I am very dedicated and passionate about my dreams, and so I work hard to pursue my goals. Good God, that's terrible. But those words are impressive. No, they're not. They're not showing anything. They're just a bunch of smoke. And that is not fire. Smoke is different than fire. We need detailed examples. You want to move towards specifics. Otherwise, you have something that literally everybody could say, and anybody can talk about their hard work trying to make the lacrosse team. Don't say hard work. Instead, I got up every morning that summer at 7 a.m. and I fired balls against the red brick wall outside my house until my shins were bruised. Oh, yeah, that sounds like hard work, but you didn't say hard work. I know, you showed it. So don't smoke word these things up. Replace those generic lame words with good details. Gimmicks, people that aren't you. We talked about not trying to be funny or sad if you're not funny or sad. Don't write your essay about other people, but you can have other characters, like Jesse's uncle is a character in his story, but that essay is not about Jesse's uncle. That essay is about Jesse. So make sure that you are sticking to who the essay is supposed to be about. Some things you can try. Many of these I've covered. Come up with more ideas than you need. There's an exercise where I say, try to think of a chair. Close your eyes and imagine a chair. And almost everybody always thinks of kind of a boring, normal chair, like 4 legs, made of wood or metal, maybe an office chair, something like that. You probably didn't think of a beanbag chair or an electric chair or a high chair for a baby. Oh, wow. Yeah, those are really creative and interesting chairs. Wow, my chair is lame. I'm such a boring, unoriginal person. No, the reason you thought of that chair first is not because you're not creative. It's because that's the most common chair. Of course, your brain thinks of that chair. It's seen that chair the most. Similarly, the first idea you come up with is probably pretty common. Think of 10 ideas, though. I bet if I made you think of 15 different kinds of chairs, you would have some really interesting ones at the end. But you got to get to those by getting the boring ones out of the way first. Use tools. We have an application essay brainstorm sheet I'll take you through in a second, but that's not the only tool in the world. Use the internet. There's a million great websites with essay brainstorming techniques. If you haven't come up with enough for me talking, go and Google brainstorming essay ideas, watch some other videos, read some other things. Don't be afraid to get help. You can also get help from people. Ask your friends, ask a teacher whom you look up to, ask your parents. Now I know, kids, your parents only have terrible ideas. Some of their ideas are terrible. It's true, parents. I'm a parent now too, and some of my ideas are still terrible. But nobody knows you better than your parent does. And so, open yourself up a little bit, take their ideas with a grain of salt. Probably 2 out of 3 of your dad's ideas are going to suck. But the third one, you're going to be like, dang it, that's actually kind of a good idea. I'm not going to tell him I used his idea. Or do tell him, and then he'll stop bugging you about taking the trash out. So get help, guys. You don't have to do this alone. Other people can give you insights on who you are that you might not yet have. You have to write your own essay, but you can talk to other people beforehand. Sometimes an idea starts pretty basic. Like, I want to write about chemistry. Probably a lot of people write about chemistry. But if you explore it further and figure out, like, okay, well, what about chemistry do I like? When did I get interested in it? Oh, when I was doing that magic show and I couldn't think of a good magic trick. So I just did a basic, like, acid-base color change experiment. And these third graders who I was performing it for were like, mind blown. Oh, you know what? Chemistry is kind of like magic. Oh, okay, that's better than just chemistry. It's okay if your idea at first is a little bit surfacey. Sometimes you got to develop it to get there. Don't be afraid to spend some time with an idea before you give up on it. We talked about the comboing idea, swimming through medicine, chem magic show. A Peacock taught me C++ was legitimately a kid's essay a few years ago about how during the pandemic, he went for walks to get some exercise. And there's this peacock in his neighborhood that was always attacking people. So he tried to stay away from it. And then he ended up being curious and bored during pandemic school. And so he learned everything there was to know about peacocks and why they get aggressive and stuff. Probably because the peacock also had COVID. That's what the C in C++ stands for. But then he was like, wait, I can do this about anything. And, I've always been interested in computer programming. Why should I not go and learn about this too? And so that indirectly led to the birth of his interest in computer programming. So again, that's like a blueberry muffin led me to calculus idea, but sometimes those combos are fun. Okay, so where are you going to go from here? Guys, I hope you already have some ideas written down, but this application essay brainstorm sheet can help you too. If you don't have to sit here and write a paragraph for each of these, you can just simply, talk into your phone for a minute or 30 seconds per and say, like, okay, well, what is the most notable thing? Oh, I'm going to start a club that does outreach to local kids who don't have enough water because I started a water bottle recycling program at my school. Oh, why don't I write about that thing? And then at the very end, I'll mention I might do this in college. But sometimes the answer to this question is not what you write your essay about, but it leads you to what you're going to write your essay about. Answer all these questions to yourself. If you go through this whole page, I promise you will have at least a few ideas that you can work with. So, stage 1 of your essay writing, before you get to even organizing or outlining your essay, that's stage 2, or writing a first draft or a second draft or a third draft, you have to brainstorm first. Go deeper than you think you have to, come up with more ideas than you think you need, and that will lead you to success. Okay, I'm going to now open this up to questions. By the way, if you do need more help, our essay class starts tonight. If anybody's not bored of hearing me talk, I guess you could still sign up for it, but you could also watch the video of it later and circle back with us. But we do essay consulting and stuff. A lot of that information is here, the essay class that we offer. And this is a good way to just bang out all 4 of your UC essay apps as well as your Common App essay. That's what that program does. If this week is too soon for you to start, we also have a more flexible program that starts a little bit later. But anyway, all of this is in the handout that you guys hopefully got. I'll also, I should put this in the chat. You have to look at my children for a minute, sorry. Let me throw this in the chat. Also respond to somebody's, not a question, here, just going. Let me put this in here, where is it? I'm throwing this in the chat for everybody in case you didn't get it before. Here it is. Or you can always email me, Paul at PJ Test Prep. If you have any questions, but we're here for support if you need any help. There's resources here, but in the meantime, what questions can I answer for you guys now? I hope to be very thorough, but if there's anything I missed, let me know. And you can also always email these questions too later.
I have a quick question.
Yes, go on, Olivia.
So you talked about like the combo idea for the PIQs. Can
Yeah,
that be used for Common App, even though it's like longer? Can you still use the brief like combo thing? Does it still
yeah.
like have the same feel?
I would actually say the combo idea often works better on the Common App because you have more space to explore it. Sometimes getting all the way from point A to point B in just 350 words on the UC PIQs is challenging. What I see a lot of students do sometimes is they'll write about their background in swimming and swimming lessons as one PIQ, and then they'll write about their interest in their internship at the hospital as another PIQ, and then in their Common App, they take those two shorter essays and mash them together, and they get a really interesting combination. So yes, you can do the combo for the UC thing. It's actually a little harder, but you definitely can do it for the longer idea. And sometimes that's the way you get there, is you start with two separate ideas that you're sort of in the middle about, and then you combine them.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, if we have no other questions, guys, we can end this. I will stop recording at this point, but you can always let me know if you guys have more questions. Email me at paul@pjtestprep.com or reach out to me via phone. Our number is also on the website, www.pjtestprep.com. And let me know what else we can do to help you guys with your essays.